Welcome in. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We are a part of the On3 network. Still not used to saying that, but we are now part of On3. All the recruiting coverage, of course, through Rivals. But you can find us at on3.com. If you're not a subscriber to Maize and Blue Review, you can give us a shot for $1 and then decide to stay permanent after that. Access to all premium national content, Michigan content, and our message board community, The Den. Very loaded special episode today. I know there's a lot of summer left, but in terms of football terms, we're kind of getting close to the end here, and a lot of things are coming together, especially for Michigan football. And with the topics I wanted to cover today, I could think of no better guest. A good friend of mine. There can be some drama on the Michigan beat, but the one guy that's kind of liked by everybody, Mr. Isaiah Hull. Glad to have you on here. Wolverines Wire, Locked On Wolverines. How you doing, sir?
Liked by everybody, liked by nobody. One as long as it's one of the two. It's got to be one or the other. So
universally non-controversial. How's that?
Listen, I can't say I'm actually liked by everybody because the James Yoders of the world do exist.
That doesn't count.
But still, as far as the people who are actually on the beat, only like 40% of them hate me. So.
Hey, in politics, those are good numbers. So,
yeah, exactly.
No, I've been blocked by Yoder for I think going on 8 years. So I didn't even realize he existed until last few months. Because now that Twitter doesn't like block what you're blocked from anymore, I've been seeing him more again, which is unfortunate. But anyway, so yeah, the things I wanted to dive in today, like I said, end of summer, Big Ten Media Days are coming up. You and I have talked a little bit about the fact it's in Vegas for some reason. We can get into that. The expectations around this program with the momentum they finished the year at, with the recruiting, and obviously Bryce Underwood. But I did want to start with the thing that's been around this program for going on 2 years now, and something obviously you were, I think, had probably one of my favorite card pulls of all time when you were talking about Connor Stalions and this whole NOA saga. And everybody kept telling you had no connections and no idea what you're talking about. And then Mr. Hull shows up in the documentary on Netflix. But without, I've talked to him a little bit, and I know you talked to him too, but without getting into it too much, Connor obviously responded to a tweet, this TCU story. I don't know how many times we can tell the same Sonny Dykes story, ironically, without telling the other part of it, which is the reason he knew about Michigan signs is because Ohio State told them and shared signs with him, but that's fine. Just with the COI hearing over and the likelihood that we'll hear about it, I've been told as soon as before Big Ten Media Days, which would be, of course, convenient, but likely before the end of the season. Where do you think people sit in terms of their anxiety or just feeling about this? And is it mostly just like, I want it over at this point?
Well, I was just on your board as we were waiting to start, and there's certainly a contingent on that board that just wants it over, doesn't want any fight back, wants whatever narrative has been set to just continue. I applaud Connor. He actually called me like 20 seconds after I saw and read that tweet. He actually called me, and we talked about it and everything like that. But I think that when it comes to internally, I'll hearken to a conversation that I had with a name that every single one of the people watching or listening know. I know people hate when I do this, but I'm not chasing clout. I have to protect sources. And they had told me some time ago, like they were relatively casually feeling it, but at the same time, it was like, you never know what the NCAA is going to do. I think that like generally, like based off of conversations that I've had with multiple people, there is not like this doom and gloom feeling that Ohio State fans would make you believe, right? Like there's just not. I think that if all of the truth came out in the COI, which it's hard to really say anything about that because it's like it's very closed door. It's beyond extremely tight-lipped, but people don't recognize that it isn't the enforcement group that did the investigating and charging and all of that heard this. So and this is speculation on my part, if they were able to essentially lay out the case and mediate the bylaw and all of that stuff. And then I think Michigan will end up being in a much better place than a lot of national media and certainly rival media believe, because like the things that are still being argued about on Twitter today is that it's sign stealing itself, right? And it's not helped by the Brett McMurphy article and relitigating a comment that was made in October 2023. And, you know, like it's sign stealing itself. There are a lot of people that say like, oh, well, you know, look at that. He didn't have the signs. And therefore, like, it's advanced scouting in the method in which is the big question. And is that enough for Michigan to be read the Riot Act? Not enough to the point where they had to put on a bunch of ticky-tack things to add on, right? Like for it to go from this is the biggest scandal, at least it was painted that way in the national media. This is the biggest college football scandal of all time. And more than half of the charges are things of the nature of Denard Robinson gave a kid a t-shirt. Like, you know, if it's murder one,
Clink helped the guy with Instagram.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
If it's murder one, you're not suddenly like saying like, oh, we've got this murder one charge, but we need to make sure in order to get a conviction, we tack on this jaywalking charge in order to secure a conviction, right? Like that just goes to show like the weakness of it all. So the vibes I've gotten based off of conversations that I've had, which again are not pertaining to the COI, but generally like they've been relatively positive from the Michigan side. Does that mean that that's how that's going to go? No, because it's completely out of their hands. But they are preparing for life being essentially the 2-game suspension, and that's it for Sherrone. And certainly there will be a show cause for Connor, the length of which is completely up in the air. Do I think he'll be banned from college football? I don't. I mean, a show cause isn't a college football ban anyway. I think a lot of people misunderstand what that even is. So I think it's not necessarily as bad. I like seeing Connor fight back a little bit on the narrative, because as much as there is some consternation on your board about like, will this guy ever go away? Like, well, I think it's good that he pushes back on some of these erroneous narratives, especially now, because it's going to get relitigated anyway in the media the moment that the COI drops its whatever it's going to do, right? So for once, like, this is the thing, is like, this is the first time that we've really heard him come out and push back publicly on anything, right? Like, otherwise it's just been like him showing that, you know, what he had to say and do in the documentary. It's been him kind of as just like almost a celebrity figure in general, breaking down football stuff. This is the first time that he's pushed back directly on social media to something that it was essentially erroneous. I took extreme humor though from seeing the 11 Warriors article on this, in which they called it an unhinged rant and said that, you know, and you see like saw like some of the comments and people calling him a lunatic. It's the most, especially knowing what I know, it's like the most like cohesive, well thought out argument rebuttal that you could have. So it makes it even that much more hilarious that it's like the rival media out there has to paint it as something that it wasn't, because it just shows that like they're drinking the haterade and they're just gonna keep going with it.
Well, and I mean, the word is narratives, right? Michigan has arguably lost the PR battle from day one, which was this military mastermind, this web of spies, and the idea that this was worth, I mean,
it's amazing, by the way,
21 points or whatever. I can't remember who said it now.
His mom going and sitting at Ross-Ade Stadium in Purdue that was the thing that put Michigan over the top.
But to your point too that you made, it's the misunderstanding of sign stealing that continues to be the theme. Like when they show clips of him on the sideline near Mint or whatever, they're like, see, I'm like, yes, you've proven at most that he was the sign stealer, right? Nobody is denying that part of it. Oh, but his job title was recruiting. Do you think it's going to be sign stealer? We know upwards of 90 to 95% of teams steal signs by using all 22 footage, by using broadcast footage, and all these other means that are legal, right? Which is what has made the rule that may or may not have been broken outdated, because all of these games are available digitally now and you're able to steal the signs, right? And that pushback on that is if that the idea is Michigan knew what play you were going to run every single time. That's the narrative that exists with some of these rival fans, which creates the entire misconception, and you can't have
Both
the debate of the nuance.
too.
Yeah, both sides, right?
Right. Like
JJ knew who was going to be open, etc. And
it just so happened that they were able to not only these players, because that's where it got so ridiculous. It's not just that Connor was a savant. Every single player that Michigan put out there, whether it was a starter or a rotational player, was such a savant that they were able to not only execute their own playbook perfectly, they had memorized the opposition's playbook as well.
Right. Well, in that clip, the most common one that we've seen from Ohio State with Stalions on the sideline from the Ohio State side kills me for multiple reasons. One, you are showing footage of the sideline and Michigan giving their signs. Further proof again how easy it is to get that. Two, they scored a touchdown on that play. So like the idea that like this is some, unbelievable advantage, right? I think two big things for me. One, when all of this came out, the Vegas lines didn't move. Not one bit. When Stalions was, resigned and left, the lines in Vegas didn't move a bit. If you want to argue with me the impact that this may or may not have had, Vegas is telling you none. Once the scandal becomes public and once Michigan changes theoretically what they're doing, right? Now, again, we can debate that Rule 11 bylaw and whether his family members or whether staff members, what piece of this is the violation? Was the NCAA able to prove that was him at Central? Things like that, I can have that conversation with folks. But the idea that this was some unbelievable worst scandal of all time, like you said, it's just where you lose me. And I'm with you where the narrative will get rewritten, right? When the judgment eventually does come out, because now it'll become the NCAA were cowards or, whatever it might be. We're still not going to be able to have that nuanced conversation, I don't think. But to your point too, the vibe around Michigan, I continue to tell people, like, does this seem like a program that is behaving like the hammer is coming, right? Whether it's the Ward extension, whether it's what's happening with recruiting and the NIL investment and all of these things. To your point, does that mean nothing bad's going to come of this? No. But I think when you look at the actions and actually read, you made the point about the national media. Pete Thamel, the day he saw the NOA, was like, yeah, their accomplishments are safe. There's not going to, no vacated wins, no bowl ban. Like, that's just not going to happen. Right. So, and all these other crazy theories that are out there, which have supposedly or surprisingly gone quiet for some reason in the last few weeks. I can't think of why that is. But all those crazy theories, it's like, this. Pete Thamel's putting out a story every night at 6:00. Everything about, look, ESPN, Connor talked, and this becomes a headline. You want me to believe there's a gambling ring and the national media is just not talking about it? Like, we've gone into a whole nother crazy category here where, we've really just, the story's absolutely jumped the shark. We've left the rails, whatever cliche you want to use. I don't even know what's real anymore with some of these conversations we're having with people.
Well, one of the things that you said about the advantage, it made me think of the thing that I was already thinking about. And I know you already know I'm thinking about it. And it's what's emblazoned on my shirt here. And that's F1 racing. Because when you look at like aerodynamics and like the different things that they do, that these teams do to just try to gain essentially milliseconds year over year.
Literally.
That's kind of what Connor was trying to do. He wasn't coming up with a scheme that suddenly gave Michigan this massive advantage. Did it help Michigan maybe run half a lap faster or half a second faster on a lap rather? Yeah, maybe. Right? Like, but they still.
But is it fair to say though, sorry, but Mr. Martini brings up Herb's 60 points. I'm thinking of 2018. Did Michigan gain an advantage or did they level the playing field? because
they leveled the playing.
We know Ohio State had Michigan signs in 2018. We've published at least the 7 pages. I don't know if there's more, but there was a 7-page PDF document of Don Brown, all the signals, again, taken from all 22, taken from TV broadcasts. Michigan wasn't doing that. And to Connor's point with his candidness, he's come out and said Michigan State wasn't. And that was a huge advantage for Michigan, right? So did they gain an advantage or did they level the playing field? The whole cat and mouse game that he's discussed.
It was all about leveling the playing field. I think it's worth rehashing something I've done on my show, but haven't done that often, which is to discuss the way that I came to really know Connor. Like, I had met Connor, but sure, I got to know him because he was on the same. Remember, people like to act like 2021. He was the first time he had been around. He had been around the program for the entirety of the time that I have covered it since 2015.
Yep.
But he did it on his own volition until 2021. So 2019, he came back for the holidays to spend with his family, his amazing parents, who I just love. But he flew out the day after Christmas, the same flight as I was, to go down to Orlando for the Citrus Bowl against Alabama. I see him waiting at the gate the moment that I clear. And then on top of that, our flight got delayed. So we ended up talking for 3-ish hours, and our seats were also pretty close. We talked at baggage claim, all that kind of stuff. He's telling me all about, because remember, the last game Michigan had at that point was a 56-27 blowout in the Big House, right? So it's the second straight one. And he's telling me about Ohio State sign stealing. Ryan Day is a voracious sign stealer. We refuse on the Michigan side, Don Brown and everybody, we refuse to obfuscate and make it difficult for them. They know everything we're doing. We're playing right into their hands in every single way, right? Because it wasn't like, I think that was a big reason why you saw some changes as well, is because not just because the cat and mouse game, but the simplicity of the calls of Don Brown's system, right? Like we would always ask in press conferences, we'd ask these players like how is it playing in this ultra complex system, and they'd all say the same thing: it's isn't not complex.
Yep.
So like all of these things combined, it all kind of played into it, right? Like, there's a reason why Ohio State was able to just boat race Michigan. And it was a lot of it. I don't place the blame on Ohio State for that. And I never have, right? Like that's legal. I place the blame squarely on Michigan, because there was so many ways in which Michigan was behind in that rivalry. And only in the aftermath of 2019, going into 2021, did Michigan start changing things. It wasn't just even the sign stealing. It was the fact that Michigan, I remember, I could get in trouble for this, but but he hasn't exactly been super kind to me in the aftermath, so I don't care. But like, I remember like messaging Josh Gaddis after Big Ten Media Days in 2019 and being like, telling him all about, and actually this has nothing to do with his response. Actually, his response was good. But I remember telling him, like, because I had interviewed at Big Ten Media Days Jordan Fuller, KJ Hill, and Jonathan, I can't remember his last name right now, Jonathan Cooper, and asked them about like their preparation for Michigan. And they're talking about team up north drills and stuff like that. And it was like maniacal, fanatical. It was every practice. It was all this stuff.
Yes.
And so I spoke to some other people within the Michigan ecosphere, and they said, well, they can do things their way and we'll do things our way. And I'm like, excuse me? Because the way you doing things your way equaled a 62-39 blowout last I checked. So I reached out to Gaddis and mentioned it to him, and he's like, we're on it, but they still didn't change anything, right? So like, what happened in 2021, right? Like that's the thing, is people like to say, what changed? Well, I did an article at one point that broke down like the myriad changes, but one of the biggest things that changed was Michigan took Ohio State seriously every single practice, instead of we will prepare for them the week of the game.
I have this conversation with Ohio State fans often, and I like the way you framed it, where it's like, when I bring up these things, I hope you know I respect what you were doing. I don't like Urban Meyer as a person, whatever, we can get into that. But the man was maniacal, like you said, as a football coach, and especially about the Michigan rivalry. And what I've explained to people, like, you've lost 4 straight games because the roles have reversed. You just described it perfectly. We were going to do things our way, whatever. Now Michigan's the one that dedicates every moment, that makes beating Ohio State a huge priority. You know, that this year, this last season, that bye week, the program kind of found itself again and said, look, we got one more home game. We got Ohio State. We can't be defined by the season. Like, so they went out and showed out at home, and they went out and beat Ohio State. And in a weird way, I feel like them winning the national championship is going to have the opposite effect, because now they're like, hey, we don't have to beat Michigan. It's like validated this belief now. And I feel like it's going to continue the trend of what's been costing them games. Urban Meyer being on Fox is giving you access to things where, like, he talked about, one of my favorite things he said is, every week my coordinators would come to me and I'd say, tell me who the 11 best players are. Okay, that's what we're going to game plan. Whether it was on practice, that might be 5 receivers, that might be 2 tight ends, whatever. That's what we're going to do. And he talked about having a freshman player that maybe you're not getting 30 snaps a game yet, but you can do something that can help me win. So I'm going to give you 3, or I'm going to give you 5 snaps, and you need to prove to me in that moment I can count on you. And I think about Garrett Wilson's touchdown in 2019. That was Urban Meyer. Like, you're too good for me to not use you at least once. Here's a deep touchdown. Boom. You helped me win this football game. And those were the things they did to win. And I think Ryan Day, I don't know, I've hashed this a bunch about how he feels about the rivalry. And I think you kind of touched on where things flipped. So, I mean, one of Josh's favorite phrases, it is what it is, right? With that whole debate. So,
I have more things I would say, but I don't want to.
I know that's where I'm at too. I've kind of hit that wall myself now, where I'm like, okay,
I just don't want to see my mentions blow up, because it's this show has been clipped by the usual suspects that watch everything I'm in and take things out of context and then just say whatever. Like, I have utmost respect for Ohio State as a program, and I always have.
I'm glad you said that. Same. And what you said about what they were doing in 2018, whenever I bring that up, I'm not trying to be like, see, you were cheating too. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. I'm saying, like, this is what you were doing, and this is what we were up against, and props to you for doing it. You didn't break any rules, or you were kings of finding the gray area, if you will, or finding the potential, loopholes, or
the double diffuser,
if you will. Right. The F, man, you are so into F1 right now. I'm obsessed with it. I love it.
It's wild.
But it's funny though, because it actually is a really good example, because there is, and the way the teams fight about a bendy wing, and every little advantage this team can find and whatever. And the door opens to potential corruption too, because of every little bit could potentially matter. So that there are a lot of parallels there. I think it's kind of fun, but let's get into, because again, that cloud's kind of hanging over, but it's going to come up at Big Ten Media Days, I'm sure. But I'm more interested in the program itself this year versus last, right? Last year was so much about this continuity stamp that we put on Sherrone Moore's hire. You deserve this hire, but you better be Jim Harbaugh, right? It's got to feel the same. Make us feel all squishy inside, that nothing's changed, right? And in a weird way, I think that the struggles early in the year and then his ability to rebound has allowed him to take over. This is Sherrone Moore's program now. Nobody's talking about Jim Harbaugh anymore. Nobody's talking about continuity and transition. It's Moore's program. He got Bryce Underwood. He's the face. They're recruiting the way he wants to recruit. This is Sherrone Moore's Michigan, right? There felt like there might have been a leadership void last year. And this year we see Max Bredeson, Derrick Moore, and Ernest Hausmann, who's been getting praise all offseason for his leadership going to Big Ten Media Days. Where do you think everything I just kind of said, where do you feel this program sits right now in terms of whether it's trajectory, optimism, or whatever? And what is now, it almost feels like we threw out last year, and now it begins the Sherrone Moore era in a weird way.
It almost kind of feels like going into 2021. in a lot of ways, right? Like,
yeah.
Even though Michigan, I have to always make this caveat because Michigan is not being fully counted out here, right? Like they're on every preseason top 25 that has come out since basically the end of last season. So it's not like they're thought of as being an also-ran, but they are still a victim as a program of something that I talked about on my show last week, which is this idea of other teams are always going to get better and Michigan will always be the same or get worse. Whatever the worst case scenario is, that is what Michigan is going to be, right? They put out what 8.5 win over under. Well, they're clearly going to be under in the eyes of many because they cannot get better, right? They were not very good last year, despite the 2 wins to end the season. There is no chance that they improve upon 8-5, right? They just can't because it's Michigan. Whereas South Carolina, Penn State, a lot of other programs like USC, Oklahoma, you know, they have a down year. It's a blip in the radar and all of that. Now, that said, as much as that might annoy me to some degree, it's also very fortuitous to Michigan because what has really driven this team and a lot of the culture over from the 2021 to 2023, it's been the chip on the shoulder. We are not getting the respect. We are that team. We are going to fight you. We are going to bully you. You're not going to be able to do the things against us that you want to do. We are the aggressor. You have counted us out before we even set foot on this field. So that and where did that start? By the way, Sherrone Moore being promoted from tight ends coach to offensive line coordinator and co-offensive coordinator. That's where it started, right? That was the identity of the team. So I think you have that mixed with Sherrone the recruiter, Sherrone the delegator. The fact that I cannot tell you how important, one of the most important wins of the season last year, as important as Ohio State and Alabama were, Northwestern. I got it. I mean, like, because they had yet to that point, whether he was an interim coach or the bona fide head coach, had not truly blown out a team yet, right? Didn't blow out Bowling Green. It was in an absolute dogfight against Maryland, right? Like the closest that he really had to like comfortable wins in just even medium-sized games, let alone big games, were actually like Ohio State and Penn State in 2023 as the interim coach, right? So to get that win showed that there was an insane buy-in that those kids could have quit easily by the Northwestern game, right? Like they're coming off of a loss to Indiana, loss to Oregon the week before. We're on the ropes against Michigan State. Right before that, lost to Illinois and Washington, right? Like, so like things were not in a very good trajectory. And yet he kept them together enough where they were able to go out and absolutely annihilate it wasn't a good Northwestern team, but it wasn't the type of team you would have expected, like maybe the 2021 team to annihilate. Like you kind of thought would look at that game and say, like, I mean, they played Northwestern, that probably a worse Northwestern team in 2021, and it was a much closer score. So I think that you have that, and then you have all these pieces like Bryce Underwood, and I think that like you look at it and you combine all of these things together, and you say like, okay, if they have the same buy-in, if they're smarter offensively, they don't have to be like world beaters, right? Like he doesn't have to throw for 4,000 yards. They just have to be smarter. And it feels the same in a lot of ways as Jim, but it's different. This doesn't feel like David Shaw, right? David Shaw had to be like not just the steward of Stanford, but he also inherited Andrew Luck for a year and ran the Jim Harbaugh program as far as he could until that didn't work anymore in Palo Alto. So I think that you might see some similar, not ebbs and flows. I think you'll see some ebbs and flows until Sherrone gets more acclimated. But I think at the same time, like he didn't inherit what a lot of Jim's, the teams that Jim has left have inherited. Even though he was inheriting a national championship team, like the 49ers as a franchise were in a much more positive space. Stanford was suddenly like viable. San Diego was great. And this time he left and was like, it's one thing to leave San Francisco and take a lot of your coaching staff because it's the NFL, right? Like it's
Right.
more about setting the player standard than anything, but coaches come and go. It's fine. But to basically take most of the massively good coaches away and do it with the timing, do it without having a quarterback, do it, having all of these different things played against Sherrone, and yet he found a way to do the most important things, beat the rivals, win the bowl game. And so that tells me that, hey, he won. Jim Harbaugh won 3 bowl games. Sherrone's already 1-0. So that's already a pretty good start.
Well, and that when you think about how tumultuous that change was last year versus this year, right? The staff continuity that exists here. The only change that was made was one that needed to be made, and Sherrone acted quickly at offensive coordinator, getting, we've been talking in different group chats and things, and this is arguably the best OC hire Michigan's ever made, because typically there are these internal promotions, other than maybe Nussmeier, right? There hasn't been an OC with this level of experience to come into Michigan before. Without getting into the X and O's, I think there is some scheme fit, and then obviously some new things he can bring, but also experience as a head coach, which frees up Sherrone. We know about Juan Castillo coming in to help offensive line. We know about Soup Campbell returning to the program to help out at wide receivers. So there's continuity and there's levels of improvement. And then, along the offense part of it, you'd like to think there's an upgrade at quarterback, that the wide receivers take a step and upgrade with McCulley, that the offensive line, I think Sherrone's been really candid about not just where players made mistakes, but where coaches made mistakes and where they're looking to improve on those. So if the defense found something at the back half of last year, Wink is back. Yes, you lose me. This part reminds me of 2022. You've lost Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. How could you possibly replace these players? And then you get the no-star defense when you lost Hutch and Ojabo, right? This committee approach where you didn't have maybe that high-level star, but they actually had more sacks. They had less yards per game. They were technically better in 22 because of this depth that they were able to add. So when I look at, you brought up the 8.5 wins. I've seen some places move to 9.5, but I feel like that's realistically where fan expectations are, right? Like 9-3, 10-2, and get into the playoff, I think is the line everybody wants to be at, right? That's successful season probably. But then you see these articles like the CBS Sports one that suggests not that Moore is on a hot seat, but maybe on the brink of it. And I wonder, what would it take for that to be true? Because pre-Northwestern, there were people already saying 1 year I'm done with Moore, right? Because this is before Bryce Underwood's flipped, and obviously the team hasn't looked good on the field, blah, blah, blah. So is he still on the short leash with that fan base? Are we maybe still in a honeymoon period and feel really good because of Bryce Underwood and beating Ohio State and beating Alabama? And if they come out and go 8-4 or 7-5 again, we're right back to where we started with maybe some anxiety in this fan base and Moore is on a hot seat. Or do you think improvement on the field, even at 8-4, allows Moore to continue what he's building? And this hot seat talk is kind of wild. Like, I guess, where's the line between success and not necessarily failure, but concern, maybe is the right word?
Depends on what those 4 are. If it's 8-4, right?
Valid.
If it's not Ohio State and Michigan State, then because here's the thing, it's like my best friend will often tell me about how during games he likes to go onto MGO blog and go into their into the chat, right? So it's like it's the same every single game, right? Like the first thing that goes wrong, and I'm sure it's the same on yours. It's probably the same everywhere. I don't know because I'm not on in-game chat. Right?
In-game chats are a wild place for sure.
Like the first thing that goes wrong, it's fire everybody. That player is the worst player that's ever existed. get rid of the coaching staff. And it's like, bro, that was the opening kickoff. And he got tackled at the 19 instead of starting at the 20. Like, settle down. Right. So like that, it depends on what the four are, because I think that beating Ohio State and Alabama to close out, when you add in also Bryce Underwood, that gives you an insane amount of latitude for the fan base. But at the same time, you're gonna see some ebbs and flows as far as the fans as far as that's concerned too, right? Like if Michigan goes and does not look good at all in Norman in week 2, there will be fans saying it's time to move on. Yeah, sure. Right. Like, and there will be media that will start to say like, oh, concern in Ann Arbor, like, right. Like that's not going to be, because that Michigan is not going back to what I said before. Michigan is not afforded the ability to have time to improve. If Michigan loses early in the season in the eyes of the national media, it's over. There's no, that's what it was like in 2018. Michigan loses to Notre Dame in week 1.
Yes.
And everyone looked at it as they're an also-ran. They're not good. It took until to getting to that Ohio State game with just that one loss before, like, really, it was obviously the gauntlet that year. But once they got through the gauntlet and everyone's like, oh, maybe we should pay attention to Michigan, right? Like, whereas other teams can lose that early season game and you're like, James Franklin loses to Iowa and you're like, that's fine. This is fine. He's still so good, right? Like Lincoln Riley can lose a game to whoever, and it's like, oh, it's fine. It's still so good. Brian Kelly has been losing the season opener to LSU every single year. They have been a perennial 8-4, 9-3 team, and every single year they are still thought of. Like, he's not thought of as being on the hot seat, really. They're still thought of as being like this team that's about to like turn the corner. They're right. Usually a top 10 team in the preseason. This year's no different. They'll probably lose in week 1 again this year because I think they play Clemson, right? And it will be like a failure for a second, and then people will forget about it by week 3. Michigan, no matter who's the head coach, is not afforded that. So Sherrone's just kind of in a space right now where, yeah, it's like we talked in the pre-show. What's wild about that, with like them saying like he's kind of in the middle, like not on the hot seat, but very well could be soon, is that Jonathan Smith was not. Like, Jonathan Smith's way more on the hot seat for Michigan State. They got a new AD. Their schedule's a little easier, but like they're just in a really kind of bad situation. I'm not saying this to dog on Michigan State. I'm just looking at it, what Michigan State is. If they overachieve, which Jonathan Smith has shown he's able to do at Oregon State, then fine. But If they have another year like he did last year, he's absolutely on the hot seat. Sherrone's got some latitude, right? Like, this is the first Michigan football head coaching hire that Ward Manuel has made. You think he's just going to suddenly like, pull the ripcord and try to get out of this ASAP? No, right? He didn't do it with Juwan Howard. And obviously he got it right with Dusty May. Hopefully this doesn't go that way. There's no indication that it will at this point, but it's one of those things where it's absurd. And it's the idea that Michigan's always going to get worse and every other team is allowed to improve other than Michigan.
And for me personally, when I feel like I have to sell people on Sherrone, when the hire was initially made, it was like, look, I don't think you guys understand how much he was head coach 1B behind the scenes and what he allowed Jim to do on a personal level. That's why Jim had so much love for Sherrone, not just what he did for his football team, but what he did for his personal life, allowing him to spend more time away from the program. Right? He earned the job. And then when he comes out and says, this is what we're going to do with recruiting, and he lays out this clear vision, and we see it implemented quickly. We see this. I mean, it sounds stupid, but the barbecue, the way they were kind of owning how viral the year before had gone with the hot dog picture and whatever, and how they had this great spread this year. I know that doesn't seem like much, but that shows self-awareness and somebody that is willing to not only acknowledge where they need to improve, make fun of themselves a little bit, right? But then take a huge step that's necessary. And we've seen the dividends in recruiting. With the offense, we just talked about it. I mentioned all the coaches. I left out Biff Poggi. A few people brought that in as well. Sherrone says, okay, this offense wasn't acceptable. Boom, 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 boom. Here's all the coaching changes I'm going to make. I'm going to go get Bryce Underwood. I'm going to do this. Here's what I'm doing with wide receiver recruiting. We're struggling to find tackles in the portal. Cool. We're going to recruit tackles like crazy, right? He's just so quickly. So for me, I just feel like, yeah, he was a first-year head coach last year and made first-year head coach mistakes. I expect those to improve because he's shown me this self-awareness and this quick ability to change. So I'm going to lean on that. But it's interesting. You bring up, I think, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State are obviously always kind of linked. And this year, in terms of expectations, Penn State, people look at the returning talent, multi-year quarterback starter, the way things align for them to be in a natty or bust type season. And they're willing to kind of ignore James Franklin, right? And the bumps that have existed before. I'm going to look at data and say, I think this has got to be Penn State's year. Because frankly, if it's not, when will it be? Right? Ohio State, questions at quarterback. Both coordinators change. And in a lot of ways, you're doing the same things and making the same mistakes Michigan did post-natty. You just promote somebody who's a good recruiter and hasn't called plays before. Matt Patricia at DC after a Jim Knowles feels like kind of a toss, right? Your O-line's probably as weak as it's been. Not the best running back room you've had. Lack of depth on the defensive line. But you're Ohio State. For 25 years, you've been a top 5 program, right? So, like, I can't predict you to go 8-4 because you don't ever. And I've kind of put myself out there and said, man, if there's a year for Ohio State to go 8-4, 9-3, this has to be it. And if they don't, then they're just never going to be worse than 10-2, right? And then you've got Michigan, like you said, who isn't allowed to improve, even though there is clear, tangible places where they've made improvement. And those story arcs and how people adjust their narratives throughout the season is going to be really interesting to me in terms of when initial expectations aren't met and how those get adjusted. And to your point, it depends how, right? 8-5, if I would have told folks 7-5 regular season at the beginning of the year, nobody would have accepted that. But your wins are Ohio State and Michigan State, and then to Bama in the bowl game. And I kind of ignore that you lose to an Indiana and an Illinois and a Washington. But so much of it's Bryce, right? I mean, the Bryce hype, we knew it would be high. But I think what's interesting about the hype around him is it's not maybe what we were hearing about like an Alex Orji last year, which is trying to convince people of talent. You don't have to do that. We know he's talented. The hype that's coming from Bryce is who he is as a person and as a leader, and in the work ethic pieces. I've repeated this a bunch, so I apologize for local viewers that heard me talk about this, but Donovan McCulley made a comment about how Bryce is running these 5 a.m. drills with wide receivers, sometimes individually, sometimes team drills. And he didn't go to one once, and Bryce got on him and he said, I felt real bad. I let him down, this and that. And I had to pause and think, this is a 5th-year senior talking about the accountability he feels towards a 17-year-old freshman. And that just shows the command that Bryce has already, in my opinion. You mentioned he doesn't have to throw for 4,000 yards. What do you think Bryce Underwood does need to do in 2025, either to make people think that the passing game is going to improve, whether that's convincing this vision that the staff is selling to recruits and trying to get these big wide receivers in, whether it's just making fans happy, or whether it's the tangible, important part of the game, which is a more efficient offense helping this team win football games? What does Bryce need to do in year one? I mean, I know the ceiling down the road could be Heisman, blah, blah. We know the potential he has. But right now, what does Bryce have to do to make us feel like the Moore train's heading in the right direction and expectations have been achieved?
Yeah, because I do think that in year 3, he better throw for 4,000 yards, right? You don't go in and get that type of quarterback and not unleash him at some point. But like this year, like I think it's funny as I keep on still seeing like the constant caveats from a lot of our colleagues that are like, oh, don't put too much pressure on him, don't expect too much, he's still a true freshman, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like, I think everyone gets that, right? Like I see just as many.
I'm guilty of it too. You're right.
I feel like there are so many Michigan fans that are just as many that are excited to see Bryce. There is equally as excited to see Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. I see them talked about just as much generally.
Yeah.
Like if I write, there's more articles to write about Bryce than there are Justice Haynes, but I would say like whenever I write something about Justice Haynes, it gets relatively equal attention, right? Like people like
I just had that happen myself. Yeah.
It becomes that it's customary now in Ann Arbor to expect to run the ball. So what does Bryce have to do? Not screw up terribly, right? Like not give games away, be relatively efficient, show off his arm. Like I think that if you see a more cohesive team performance in that, but the same type of thing that you saw in the spring game, I know the stat line wasn't good, but you look at what Bryce did in the spring game. It like seeing it in person was, through a compressed lens. We both had that experience. It was what it was. But then going and rewatching it on re-air, I'm like, I was actually pretty impressed at his performance.
Yes.
Way more than I was beforehand. And I think that if he plays basically that game and gets a little bit more help from his teammates, like, yeah, he had a couple mistakes in the spring game, right? Like the first play of the, couple of those plays, right? The first play of the game and not being able to get the snap off. Obviously the interception, the near interception, all that kind of stuff. So I think year one, I think he's capable of being Trevor Lawrence year one. I absolutely think that he's capable of doing that. But what I think that they just need really is Cade McNamara 2021.
Right.
I 100% think that that's all they really need, right? And keeping in mind that Michigan had arguably the most explosive offense in the country at that point, but it was quiet. No one really looked at it that way, but yet they had more 50-plus yard plays than any other team in the country by the end of the year. So they end up getting surpassed by Ohio State after the Rose Bowl, but Ohio State playing against Utah. Was it that year? No, that was I can't remember.
Yeah, it was that year. Yeah, JSN they had a running back at corner and JSN went off.
Yeah. So that was the game, that they got surpassed by Ohio State, but like that's really what they need is just essentially, I mean, I should just say Michigan's quarterback play in general in 2021. Cade made very few mistakes. He only threw a couple interceptions. He was mostly very efficient. I think he was passing for 70-ish percentage. And then they brought in JJ, who ran and then occasionally threw a deep ball. That's exactly like they just need that all from one guy. And it wasn't anything crazy flashy generally. Like there were a couple wow plays, mostly from JJ. There were a couple wow plays that people downplayed because it was from Cade McNamara and no one wanted to give him any praise. So I think that if they get that, whatever that was, then they'll be in great shape. And maybe it won't have the same yardage because if everything goes well, especially given Michigan's schedule, Bryce might not be playing full games. Like that's we'll see how that goes. And, the schedule really, like, you don't want to play Bryce all of week one. You don't want to play him all of week 3, right? Like you don't want to take that chance. You saw what happened this last year when, Colston Loveland gets hurt against Arkansas State, and then you don't have him for multiple games throughout the year. I think that we'll see if the yardage is there, but like I saw one of the commenters there even said like 7 interceptions. I hope it's not even that high, right? Like if it's 16 touchdowns, I would hope and think it'd be more like 3 or 4. He's not an interception machine either. He's a very accurate quarterback. And we saw a lot of processing from him in the spring game that we didn't see last year at all from any of Michigan's quarterbacks. And honestly, he's got similar processing. You saw similar ability in going through his progressions, stepping up in the pocket. It looked very similar, more so to junior year JJ, which is what Connor had told me he saw when he was working with him.
Yep.
To then even sophomore year JJ. So I'm not saying that you should expect junior year JJ, but I think you could realistically expect sophomore year JJ even from a true freshman because I think he's that good.
And I've mentioned that before too, not just Connor's comments, but a player on this team who is a veteran who was around for JJ saying he's already Bryce, already making throws JJ couldn't, or that he's already better than JJ. And what I've said is, look, I have no idea if that's true or not. Probably not, right, in terms of football IQ, just because there's experience that has to be gained on the field. But the players believe that. That shows you what they think of him, right? From what they've seen, that's what they believe. Do you think, I think there's a hesitancy with this fan base because of a perception of, despite Big Ten championships, despite a national championship, and then obviously before that, the 17 through 19 run, that when Michigan has gotten these uber talented players, we've never really seen them reach what we would call that full potential, that high ceiling, right? The fact that JJ McCarthy didn't set passing records at Michigan, obviously he leaves a winner, nothing but a winner. Nobody's upset with the career that JJ had, but there's kind of this feeling that we never really saw his full potential, right? And then that connects to, again, before that, a DPJ, a Nico Collins. It is that part of it where we look at this and go, okay, in 3 years to be the best quarterback in Michigan history, that's 10,000 passing yards, that's 90 touchdowns. If Bryce doesn't do that, if he doesn't leave being the most decorated statistically quarterback in Michigan history, not that would be a failure, but like, I think people are just kind of poised for like, yeah, Bryce has all this potential, but we're not going to let him chuck it. And he's not going to get those yards, and he's not going to get that touchdowns number, right? That feels like a hedge that exists with this fan base that's holding them back from being fully excited and optimistic, because it just feels like, yeah, we're still not going to let him loose.
I think that is certainly, but like, with JJ, I mean, it's kind of what I just said that you hoped you see with Bryce. Like, he wasn't playing. And a lot of Michigan fans will bring that up when people like to be like, LOL, JJ, you know, when they point out his lack of passing yards compared to some of the other greats out there in college football. And people will rightfully point out, like, he was out, like, he maybe played a drive in the second half and that was it, right? Like, I think that you might see something similar with Bryce all throughout his career. And I should actually recant the 4,000 yards passing thing, because here's the thing is Michigan wants to win. It doesn't care how pretty it looks.
Correct.
Right. Like yeah, they'll have some problems if they have a 40-point lead and they end up only winning by a score or two in the end of a game. Right. Like, there's a reason why there was so much angst coming out of the USC and Minnesota games last year, not just from the fans, but also the team itself. And it's because, like, they had commanding leads in both of those games, and both of them ended up with the exact same final score, 27-24, and required like late stands to make sure that they were able to hold on. So with that, I think that you're not necessarily going to see, like, you know, Michigan running wild. Like, there's a reason why you would see a lot of, like, whether it's like Ohio State, LSU with Joe Burrow, you know, a lot of these high flying offenses, they tend to stat pad, what I should say, a lot more, right? Like, and that's fine for them. Michigan it's kind of Lloyd Carr's Michigan all over again in a lot of ways. We're like, you know, we're going to beat you, and we'll beat you up in the trenches. That doesn't mean that the score is going to be insanely lopsided. So will it be that with Bryce in, you know, this year or in the future? I don't know, but I wouldn't. It's funny because you see Michigan fans push back against rival fans often about what the offense had been before last year, and then kind of turn and want to have the same expectations, right? Like, the narrative, kind of like the same thing with the Connor stuff, and those who, like, you know, I love the people on your board, and I love the people actually on your board who are arguing against Connor. So I'm not saying this type of stuff to like rip on them. Shout out to Lummy, but it's one of those things where there are people that want to embrace the narrative that had been set outside of the program, right? So I think that that's kind of what that is too, right? Like, because like Michigan fans had no problem winning the way that they did in, you know, 2021 through 23. But at the same time, when you get a Maserati, you want to see the Maserati be the Maserati, right? You don't want to see it be a Honda Civic. And I think that when it comes to the stats and everything, ultimately it might look like a Honda Civic if you're like, oh, that's what it was for the whole race. And you're like, no. They only ran half a race with the Maserati. So I don't know why I took it out of F1 terms. I could have absolutely gone Red Bulls and Max Verstappen, but I chose not to.
You're not fully there yet. You're getting there though. You're dangerously close with the amount of
I know.
I think you kind of just put a good bow on what has become the theme of this show, which is narratives, right? And I think when it comes to Connor, Lummy, and people like that feel like they're exhausted by Connor, but what they're really exhausted by is the narratives that exist and the story persisting, right? And 90%, if not more than that, I hate putting a fake number on it, has not been Connor extending the story. Because like you said, other than the documentary, which was his first opportunity to speak at all, and that was just kind of introducing himself to people, there wasn't much about the scandal at all. It was more just me and how I got here. The Bussin' with the Boys podcast, which anybody who hasn't seen that's just straight football talk and incredible. I thought he did an amazing job on that. He went on.
I actually haven't seen it
as well. You haven't?
No.
That's because what's in there you don't know already from him. But
I know it all. It happened right after, because he told me he was thinking about doing it while we were at the Washington game. He's like, I think I'm going to fly and meet up with them right after this. And then I got pneumonia and lost hearing in one of my ears. I didn't have a voice for a month, so I just never even bothered to watch it. It was a rough October, not just for Michigan football, but for.
I kind of vaguely remember you being really sick. Yeah, I think it's the difference between the conversations that exist on social media and then what happens when you put two football players who have been ultra successful at college and got to the NFL in the same room with Connor and just talk football. And it kind of goes back to our original piece of like what was actually happening, what the actual impact was, and the way they can laugh at like, oh yeah, you mean on 3rd and 15 they were running? Of course they were doing that. Like, I've played enough football. I know that's what they're going to do, right? Like that part of the conversation. And then, the narrative around the offense. I remember going into the national championship.
It's a pass. It's a pass. Really, Ohio State under Ryan Day is going to pass the ball on a 3rd and whatever.
There was a Michigan State play too, where it was like less than a minute left in the half, center, half midfield, whatever, 3rd and something. And they're like, oh, they knew they were going to pass it. Well, yeah, of course duh, right? But that, and then back to again the confusion between sign stealing and the advanced scouting. But I was gonna say with the offense, I remember going into the national championship game with Washington, and I'm looking at these stats about like efficiency, right, and points per possession, and Michigan's up there with the Oregons and the most explosive offenses that are out there and efficient. And it's this thing where it's like you don't see a video game offense, you don't see all these huge plays, so you think it's not good. Right, when the way Michigan wins is efficient, is explosive. Maybe it's just not as pleasing to your eye. It's not the home runs in baseball. It's the small ball, right? And I think that's largely where they want to get back to. But maybe you pepper in, I don't know how many times I've had this combo too. I can put on any college football game on Saturday and see somebody get open. Right. It's just the ability to scheme people open in college football isn't that hard. And I think that's something Lindsey's going to be able to do, where Bryce can make these easy throws to a McCulley or a Fred Moore or a Channing Goodwin or a Samaj Morgan, allow these guys to make some plays. And to your point, even JJ's 22 season or even 23, if he connects on 4 of these deep balls that they were always just a little off, touchdown numbers go up, yards go up, and all of a sudden the narrative completely changes. Right. It's not a matter of, hey, we've been a 50-50 offense, we need to throw it 60% of the time. No, they just need to execute a little bit better on the passing plays they have, and you're going to see what you think is a much more explosive offense. So that's where I'm at. I think I'm in a similar place with you, where by junior year, I want to see Bryce be the story of college football. Right. But for this year, I look and go, man, if somebody of Bryce's caliber had been on the team in 24, do they beat Indiana?
Oh, absolutely.
Illinois, Washington. They're a 10-2 team last year.
Heck, if they had someone of Bryce's caliber on the team last year, they very well could have beaten Texas, right? Like the problem for Michigan wasn't just that the offense was bad. It was that when the defense was still trying to figure itself out, the offense could do nothing. So just by having somebody that could essentially, going back to the cat and mouse game, essentially, that can level the playing field just enough, right? Like, because if they just have a competent offense against Texas a little bit, just to give the defense enough time to figure out what to do, like they did in the second half, then you might have yourself a game. And I think that's where, like, this year it's going to come down to how quickly can they figure out how to. And my glasses are talking to me. This is a fun new thing that I'm dealing with. Sorry, I was getting distracted. Battery 15%. I have the metas. So, but the
joke's right there. You know what joke I'm gonna make? I'll let it.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm gonna wait to make it. You'll understand what I mean by that later. But I think that's the big thing, is just having given Wink Martindale and the defense and those players who are learning the system, learning to play together in these starting roles, just enough time. I think that if they would have just been able to move the ball a little bit, score some points earlier, right? Like Texas drives the field, ends up missing the field goal. If Michigan's offense is able to just drive the field instead of just, I don't remember if it was a 3 and out, but I'm pretty sure it was.
I think it was, yeah.
Going 3 and out, giving them the ball back, and then Texas drives the field again, and then you're just in this spot where it's like, okay, it's only 7-0, but it feels perilous because we saw Texas drive the field twice and Michigan can't do anything offensively. So I think just by having someone that, if for no other reason, can like stretch things out with his legs, and you've got a much, what should be an improved running game. You've got, I still think it's going to be a much better offensive line than what we saw last year. I know a lot of other people don't seem to believe that, because they kind of buy into the Michigan can never get better narrative as well. Right. And so I think that that could have been a much better team, because now, yeah, you had to have some receivers too. You pretty much have the same receiving core, plus Donovan McCulley, plus Anthony Simpson, who I don't think people should sleep on, plus Jamar Browder and Andrew Marsh. I think that there's a lot of potential. I'm still very concerned about the receiving group because we have not seen it.
Right.
But other than that, like, I've seen Bryce ball out in high school. I saw him have the spring game he had. I've seen the defense play the way that we know the defense can play. So with all of that, plus the schedule, it just becomes a funny thing where you start to see, I know I'm transitioning into 2025 here a little bit, but you start to see like people starting to kind of mitigate the circumstances. And I don't know why. Like, ooh, road game at Nebraska.
Yes.
Where it's like, you're generally not concerned about that, but you are, because Nebraska's getting this hype because they made a bowl game. Right? Like, do we, like, just because Nebraska's, people are saying, oh, watch out for Nebraska, doesn't mean you actually have to watch out for Nebraska. Michigan very well could lose that game. Absolutely could lose that game. But like, we're starting to talk about Oklahoma, who had a similar, I think, one loss more than Michigan once you factor in the bowl game record as Michigan. And then you have Nebraska, who any time generally you'd be sitting there thinking about and saying like, oh, that's an auto win, home or away, no matter what, because we just haven't seen that be a relevant program since Bo Pelini. And even that was like an oasis in the desert. And then, like, okay, like USC is not good as they've been. I'm concerned about that because it's a trip to Los Angeles, 5-hour flight.
Time zone. Yep.
It with no bye week surrounding it. Ohio State, as much as we're starting to all look at that as an auto win, is not an auto win. That's still the toughest game on the schedule. I think Michigan's more primed and capable. But, like, we're really freaking out about a team that was essentially on a similar plane as Michigan, and a team that's been nowhere within Michigan's stratosphere. And then people are still trying to find other ones that they say like, oh, I don't know. I guess Washington might end up being pretty good, but like, it's, to me, it's like, if I'm building Michigan to be Michigan, right, to just be the team that it's been, not even not the last 4 years or 3 years minus last year. If I'm looking to just have a Michigan team that is what it was from 2015 forward, like, what are we talking about? Like, everyone's kind of acting like suddenly like Michigan can't play with anybody just because last year was a debacle. And really, it was a debacle for one reason and one reason only. And that was Dominic Zavada's got to get his head in the game, man. I'm tired of
it. What a great note to finish on. Zavada-matic. I couldn't help but notice in the background with your scrolling Michigan sign there that we have New Mexico, 47 days, 14 hours, 46 minutes. Who's counting, right? Football's coming soon. And like I said, we have summer, we have media days and then fall camp not around the corner. I knew the conversation would be amazing, but Isaiah, you came through. I hope Bryce reaches expectations like you have on this podcast. Thank you sincerely for coming on, and thank you again. I know I did message you afterwards, but the amount of care and assistance you gave me in my first photography expedition at the Big House, you really made me feel comfortable and allowed me to get my favorite photo of all time. So I appreciate the support you've given me.
Absolutely amazing photo too, man. And it's my pleasure too, right? You know, like the second most important commandment is to treat others how we want it to be treated, right? So it's nothing, you know. I just literally trying to show Christ. That's all. So
no, you're a good person, good friend, above all. Great photographer, but good person, good friend. I appreciate you. Look, you have a lot of fans in here. I think they know where you are already, but I know you also have plenty to plug. So if you want to, feel free to let everyone know the multitude of places where you are currently putting content for them to devour.
I'm not gonna plug the typical things, but what I am gonna do is hint at a certain secret thing that is extremely niche, as you know. People watch out for it. It's coming hopefully in like a week or two.
I'm so excited. I've needed a partner in crime, and you are going to be that. I'm so excited. There's a few people that follow me with that niche as well that I think will be very intrigued. But yeah, look at me. I'm genuinely. I'm so excited.
As am I. I had to take a step away from working on it because it was like, all right. But
yeah, you did. I'm not checking it because I'm sleeping, but I go through and I've got messages from you at like 5 a.m. like, hey, look at this logo I made. I'm like, go to bed. What are you doing?
Yeah, I know. I literally did not sleep until like 8 a.m. And hey, Darbos, glad to see you guys there. Yeah. I literally did not sleep until I think 8 a.m. I finally like nodded off because my mind was racing with ideas. So I'm plugging this. Now, if you're an avid Michigan football fan and that's it, are you going to be excited about the thing I'm talking about? Probably not. But I'm excited about it. Trevor's excited about it. So Nebulous, be ready.
I love it. All right. So thank you again. We will have that. We'll be all over Twitter sharing this project that Isaiah has gone maniacal with, that I'm excited to engage in with him as well. Maize and Blue review followers, very, very active viewership while we've been live. I appreciate you in the comments. For those that watch us back or listen on streaming, please head over to YouTube, subscribe, notification bell so you know when we go live. We have Hail to the Podcast. Good Afternoon Michigan with Dennis Fithian live during the day, interactive show as well. Aiden Sen, we do our Who's Got Next recruiting show, plenty of content, and it all is just a slice of the pie that you can find over at on3.com with Maize and Blue review. Again, subscription gets you access to all national content, college sports, recruiting coverage with rivals, all Michigan content, and our community, The Den, where Mr. Isaiah Hole is a avid poster. Are you keeping the secret name, by the way, or are we gonna reveal
because it's Black Gandhi. Like that was okay. My
I saw that. I was like, huh.
I went incognito on the Wolverine when I signed up there.
Yeah.
And just so like no one knew who I was. And then Chris Ballas, he doxed me, he outed me. So I kept it. But then once there was the combination, like I couldn't, I had to have one or the other. So I'm just staying with I'm staying with the one that everyone knew on the other site because I'd already been because it was already established and whatever. So
I was hoping that maybe people wouldn't know and that you could not dox yourself, but argue against yourself or troll some folks that maybe said something bad about you, but that's okay.
I'm sure that everyone knows on your site, so there's still time.
Yeah, there's still time. Beautiful. All right, folks. Can't thank you again. I'm going to let Isaiah go. We're going to let you guys go, and hopefully we'll see you again live next Sunday here on Hail.